Hello and welcome back to Viper Bites Primetime Preview Thursday Night Football. We have the 6-5-1 Pittsburgh Steelers, who are a half game back of the AFC wild card. We've got the 5-7 Minnesota Vikings, one game back of the NFC wild card. And you know what? You've heard of Freaky Friday, but you know what? Things get really interesting, really greasy on Thursday night and Thursday Night Football. We don't know what's going to happen each and every week, and that is why we love this game so much. Now, let's dive right into this tale of tape, and we'll start at the quarterback position, and Ben Roethlisberger, who comes into this contest as the 18th leading passer as far as yardage is concerned, while tossing 16 touchdowns along with 6 interceptions, which for fantasy managers adds up to about QB number 22, averaging 14.8 fantasy points per game. Yeah, that's not ideal. Now, while that average isn't good, he does have some weapons that have some appeal, especially when looking at two things. First, it's Thursday Night Football. That is where weird things happen. It's on Thursday night, so maybe Ben Roethlisberger will be good. There's a possibility. It's unlikely, but it's Thursday night, so I'm not going to put it past there. And second, the Minnesota Vikings, they are allowing 18.6 fantasy points per game, which is the 5th most to the quarterback position. So that would line up for Roethlisberger to be in for a solid start, which, I have that as a 17-point performance is what I use as a metric. Now, Minnesota has allowed 21 passing touchdowns, 3,221 yards through the air. But at the end of the day, it's still Ben Roethlisberger, and that arm, it's not what it once was. Now, what is old is new, and what is new is old. I don't know what the saying is, but Najee Harris, he is new, he is good, and he is everything that the Steelers have wanted in their running back to be so far this year. Najee Harris sits 5th in fantasy points this season amongst running backs with 215.6 fantasy points. That is an average of 18 per game, all while running with the 7th most rushing yards, 779. He has also added 387 yards in the passing game on 57 receptions. Now, I've never been good at math, so that's why I have a calculator right here. And that adds up to 1,166 yards in 12 games, which is just under 100 yards from scrimmage per game. Yeah, I think that's good. Now, the Vikings run defense is allowing running backs to have 24.15 fantasy points per game. And you know what? It really is just Najee Harris in this backfield. Benny Snell, whatever you want to call it, not going to factor in this equation at all. Part of Najee's success, look, PFF, they put him out there, they grade him. 60 missed tackles forced is the most in the National Football League, and that is a large part of what Najee Harris does best. Now, if you are Diontae Johnson, and forget that Ben Roethlisberger is your quarterback for just a minute, you have had this one circled in your calendar for quite some time. The Vikings are 31st in the NFL in fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position, allowing almost 42 points per game. They have yielded the 3rd most passing yards this season, 2,229, and the 3rd most touchdowns to receivers, 15. Now, while he has missed some time, Johnson, he's still managed to be the wide receiver 7. So he's not only has he missed time, but he's got Ben Roethlisberger as his quarterback, and he is still the wide receiver 7 in PPR scoring with 205 points in just 11 games. Now, you look at that, that's insane to me. Every time I think about that, I honestly thought that there'd be a bit of a dip in Diontae Johnson this year. That has not happened. Now, it also doesn't hurt when you see 10 or more targets in 4 straight contests and 9 of the last 11. In the last 4 games, Johnson has 384 receiving yards on 31 receptions. I think it's safe to say that you can expect more of the same under the prime time lights this week. Now, his running mate there, running opposite of him there, Chase Claypool, has not been productive much this season. And really, he's been pretty much a disappointment for those that really banked on his production based on what we've seen last year. Now, Mapletron has failed to record 100 yards receiving since way back in week number 5. Actually, that was the only time in which he accomplished that feat. Now, he hasn't been terrible per se, but last season, through 13 weeks, Claypool found the end zone on 8 occasions. Now, this year, only once. While his numbers last week weren't great against the Ravens, which was a favorable matchup, 2 catches for 52 yards, if you take his workload over the last 3 weeks, that production looks a little bit more serviceable. 10 catches for 227 yards. And if he can find an end zone this week, maybe we're back in business. Now, who's always been good for business? Pat Freiermuth. Okay. He is the tight end 13 in fantasy with 114 fantasy points, which may be a bit of a surprise to some. He is also second among rookie tight ends, which probably doesn't shock many people, but what may catch your attention, he only trails Kyle Pitts by 11.6 fantasy points in PPR formats. If you watch these videos and you've tuned into the Vipercast, you know I've had a bit of a tongue-in-cheek and may or may not have boldly predicted that Freiermuth ends up as a tight end one for rookies. Well, you know what? There is a possibility that that could actually happen. Now, over the last 7 games, Freiermuth has 5 double-digit fantasy production weeks, and he's been doing it the way that neither Claypool nor Pitts has been able to do it. He's been able to find the end zone. He has done that 6 times thus far. I mentioned Claypool. He's only scored once. Kyle Pitts, well, he's only tallied one of those in the touchdown column as well. Minnesota, they've been pretty frugal when it comes to giving up them tight end fantasy points, ranking 6th in the entire league. Now, turning our attention over to the Minnesota Vikings, everybody, and I mean everybody, put your hand down. Everybody loves to hate on Kirk Cousins. It's true, he does feed into the hate more often than not, especially when you're talking about primetime type games such as this one, but he is 6th in the league in passing with 3,353 yards. That's right behind Patrick Mahomes and right above Josh Allen. His 25 touchdowns, that is the 6th most in the league, and 3 interceptions against. You know what? That's very un-Kirk-like, if you ask me. And guess what? Cousins, he is the 8th highest scoring fantasy quarterback, and he's giving you on average 20 fantasy points per game. And in 4 of his last 5 games, he has recorded more than 17 fantasy points. Last week, in that loss to Detroit, 30 of 40, 2 touchdowns, 340 yards. Yeah, you could pick apart what you want to blame Kirk Cousins to be, but as a fantasy quarterback, he has been money this year. Now, you have to like Cousins' odds of keeping that trend going against the Steelers team that is allowing 17.7 points per game to the quarterback position. Remember, 17 is that threshold for me. Now, looking at that running backs position, Alexander Mattison, Dalvin Cook, who's it going to be? Will it be Cook, who was limited on Wednesday, or will it be Mattison getting that opportunity to repeat last week's RB8 PPR type performance that saw him carry the ball 22 times for 90 yards, plus that touchdown? Oh, and he also added 3 more receptions for an additional 34 yards. We know if Cook is out, you are going to fire up Mattison. If Cook is in, you're probably going to fire up Dalvin Cook. It's pretty much that simple. Now, Mattison, he is not quite at Cook's level when Cook is fully healthy, but he's darn close. And again, if Cook is out, and again, he was limited and he's kind of trending towards that out designation, you've also got Thielen out, which means more involvement in the passing game for Alexander Mattison. I think you're going to see him become more of a featured role in that part of the game for the Minnesota Vikings. And we talked about the Steelers team. They are allowing 24 fantasy points per game to running backs and have given opposing backs 11 touchdowns this season. That's 9 on the ground and 2 more via the passing game. Now, speaking of that passing game, you've got one of the best to do it this season in Justin Jefferson, who ranks 2nd in receiving yards, 1,209. 7th in receptions with 78. 8th in targets, 112. And he's also 8th in touchdowns with 7. So there's really no way to stop Jefferson, but the Steelers hope to be able to contain him. That's probably easier said than done, because on the season, Jefferson is 2nd in PPR production, sitting only behind Cooper Kupp with 241.7 fantasy points. And since week 8, no receiver has more fantasy points than Jefferson, who's accumulated 130 of those 140 in the last 6 weeks. Jefferson and company face the 24th ranked fantasy defense and points allowed to receivers, as the Steelers are allowing 36 fantasy points per game and have allowed 1,972 receiving yards and 13 touchdowns. Now, when you're coming off a 182-yard performance like Jefferson is against the Lions, you should expect a little bit more double coverage. But you know what? I don't even think that's going to slow him down. It may only make him angry. Now, we know Adam Thielen, he's already been ruled out this week. That's a tough break for the Vikings. But guess what? KJ Osborne, he is a solid play this week, and he is more than capable of filling in that role that Thielen is going to that void that he's left out there in that lineup. Now, Pittsburgh will be probably paying a little bit extra attention to Jefferson this week, as they probably should. But Osborne is a good wide receiver when given that opportunity. Now, Osborne put up 47 yards on 4 receptions, but he did have 7 targets last week. And his role, that is expected to be expanded, knowing that Thielen is out, getting that full week of practice with the ones. Osborne has 5 games this season in which he has seen 6 or more targets, and in 3 of those contests, he posted at least 75 yards receiving. I think you could feel good about him, especially in the flex spot this week. Now, another guy I feel really good about, back at the tight end position. We mentioned the wasteland that is the tight end position. Tyler Conklin is also a great play. Thielen was that dude in the end zone. His 10 touchdowns were amongst the most among any pass catcher out there. And Cousins will be looking to replace Thielen in the red zone, a role you can expect Conklin to be more than capable of filling in the meantime. Now, Pittsburgh, they are pretty good defending tight ends as well, having allowed only 2 touchdowns this season to the position, the 12th fewest yards at 581. But since week 10, Conklin is tight end 6 in scoring. Tight end 6 in scoring. That's Tyler Conklin we're talking about. I feel pretty good about a tight end that's producing nearly 10 points per game, especially when they're coming off a 7-catch, 9-target performance like we saw last week. Volume is key, and with Thielen out, expect more volume to be moved towards Tyler Conklin's direction. With that said, that is your Thursday night football preview. Hey, if you're still watching, take a second, hit that thumbs up there. There they are. There's my thumbs. They're also down there. Make sure to hit that button. Hit that subscribe button. We want to hear from you, so drop some comments here while you're at it. And if you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, Anchor, Pocket Cast, whatever that podcasting platform may be, take a moment, rate and review the show. And if you want, hit me up on Twitter at Matt Donnelly FF. You got questions, starts and sits, waivers, trade advice, parenting, I got that too. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. But make sure to hit me up on Twitter. Slide in those DMs. I got you covered. And we'll see you next time. Take care.